I want to thank everybody for coming, and I'm pleased to be joined with some key legislative leaders, Assemblyman Ruben Ramos, Chair of the Assembly Oversight Committee, Peter Barnes, Vice Chair of the Environment Committee, and Reed Gusiora, the former Chair of the Environment Committee and been active on a lot of environmental issues, especially toxins. We're here today because we're going to be releasing, and you'll be getting it electronically, two reports that have been done on Hurricane Katrina. And the reason why we're releasing them is because one's from a university and one's from the General Accounting Office, is because I think they are important into what happened here in New Jersey with Hurricane Sandy. And so we have to look at what happened in other places in order to look at what's going on here, or what potentially can go on here. The Sierra Club was involved in the Gulf, in Mississippi, and in Louisiana in the cleanup following Hurricane Katrina. Sierra Club actually sued the states of Mississippi and Louisiana. Unfortunately, those suits were thrown out because of the emergency powers that the governors have taken. What happened was Sierra Club was questioning the debris removal and the piling of debris throughout Louisiana and Mississippi, and the reopening of closed landfills and not putting debris piles in appropriate places. And the reason we're bringing it up now is because with this controversy that's happening in New Jersey over debris and contracts, it was the same company. It was Ashbrit. Ashbrit there had no bid contracts. Here they have no bid contracts. There they moved debris piles around. Here they moved debris piles around. There they opened landfills that were closed. Here landfills that were closed were open. There was no governmental oversight or transparency in the process. Here there's been no governmental oversight or transparency. And that's why we think it's appropriate. We hope what's happened down there is not happening here, but we don't know. And I just wanted to touch base on a couple of these issues because in the GAO report, which was a pretty scathing report on the handling of waste and the mishandling of waste, what also happened there was not only the two main sites that we'll get into later, but there are at least 9 questionable sites just in Louisiana. And the EPA had to step in and stop some of the things that were happening there as far as debris removal and piling up construction material and things with asbestos and hydrocarbons. But also what happened were massive piles being put in places in floodplains, next to wetlands. And there was a series of problems, and so the GAO in 2008, they did a first report in 2007, called to task both the EPA for not doing enough oversight and the state agencies for waiving things and looking the other way. And there was actually a Senate hearing about it, and I think one of my favorite quotes from someone who is not normally associated with the environmental movement, Senator Imhoff, who doesn't believe in climate change or the environment, said in the hearing after reading the GAO report and after the hearing, said that we spent $3 billion on cleanup and we ended up with 1, probably 2 Superfund sites. What happened there, was pretty outrageous to some of the communities. And the Gentilly landfill and the agricultural landfill, both in New Orleans, where debris mountains were piled. When the next storm hit, toxic chemicals and others were running right into neighborhoods. In fact, people in New Orleans labeled the agricultural Avenue landfill Dante's Inferno because of all the toxic goo that was coming out. And that's why we're here. There was also big piles at a NASA site in Mississippi and wetlands. And the concern that we have is that it's the same basic conditions that have been set up here, where we have done emergency orders, we've taken emergency powers, we've waived environmental standards, we've waived transparency, we have no accountability, and yet, why do we expect a different outcome? The other, I think, clear concern that we have is that when the state of New Jersey entered into their no-bid contract, why didn't they do due diligence? Doing diligence is not calling up the lobbyists for Ashbridge. Due diligence is actually talking to U.S. senators or talking to the GAO or doing a web search to take a look at their record. And when you look at Ashbridge's record, when it comes to cleanup in both Louisiana and Mississippi and later in Haiti, you would wonder why you would even want to bring them in. You know, it has nothing to do with all the other issues that other people can raise. This is very specific on due diligence. And here we are in New Jersey, where we are passing emergency orders, we are waiving environmental compliance, we are waiving standards to dealing with solid wastes, and where's the accountability? In Louisiana and Mississippi, the EPA came in and did oversight. Here, the Christie administration has not brought the EPA in. In New York State, in New York, EPA has actually been collecting hazardous materials. They're not been invited here to do that. So we want to know where the oversight is, and that's why we're here. But more importantly, you know, we're talking about not only public money being used, but what's the outcome, and you know, and what's going to happen here in New Jersey. We have 132 sites currently. There were over 260 at one time. Many of them were put in any place they could find, ball fields, former landfills, piled up next to bridges, and what kind of due diligence was done here. That is a real concern, and I think that's why we have the Oversight Committee here. But more importantly, I think Hurricane Sandy was a disaster, and we shouldn't make disasters worse by not following proper procedures. You know, why didn't New Jersey have an emergency management plan for solid waste? DEP's had studies going back 20 years about storm surges and sea level rise, and DEP predicted this type of event for decades. There were wonderful mapping done in 2005 by Rutgers for DEP. There were plans in place by DEP in 2009 in the coastal risk assessment that was actually signed off in 2010 by this administration. Talked about the vulnerability of sea level rise and storm surges affecting our coast and affecting the barrier islands and the bay shore areas, and yet we had no emergency plan in place. That to me is also why we believe we need to have you know, clear oversight. And so we're here today hoping that what happened in Louisiana and Mississippi does not happen here, but we don't know. And I want to first bring up Ruben Ramos to say a couple of words, and then
thank you, Jeff, Mr. Tittle, for having me here this morning. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you tomorrow. And as the chair of the Regulatory Oversight Committee, we're looking forward to our hearing tomorrow to answer some of the questions that Mr. Tittle proposed this morning as far as efficiency for our taxpayer dollars, to making sure that the process going forward isn't repeated as it was in the past. We saw what happened with Hurricane Katrina, and we hopefully, New Jersey, learned from those incidents. So tomorrow and going forward, we want to make sure that New Jersey taxpayers are protected and make sure that they have the value for the dollar they're paying for, and making sure that the rebuilding process is one that's transparent going forward and one that is protecting the environment moving forward as well. And so we're looking forward to a wonderful discussion tomorrow to answer these questions as to the why, how, and the way this cleanup is going to be taking place going forward, and the input that New Jersey residents are going to be having in that process. We understand emergencies. Emergencies happen all the time, but the lack of preparedness for such an emergency that took place with Hurricane Sandy, knowing for the past of Hurricane Katrina, and somewhat looking back at those instances, and our lack of preparedness, the piggybacking off of a contract that FEMA clearly states should not have taken place in their guidelines for the best of New Jersey residents. So we're going to have an interesting hearing tomorrow. It's not what some people may want to call a witch hunt for Ashbridge, but it's more of a fact-finding mission, a homework assignment that I would tell my students that the Speaker has given us and the Senate President has given us to try and get to the bottom and the solutions so it doesn't happen going forward, and we ensure that the best practices are happening as we pursue this process of rebuilding the state of New Jersey the best we can. So again, I thank you very much, Mr. Tittle and the Sierra Club, for having us here today, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful hearing tomorrow. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Peter Barnes, Vice Chair of the Assembly Environment Committee.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Many of us are concerned about a lot of the things that have gone on with the Ashbridge contract, but I think the number one concern would be oversight or a lack of oversight. As Ruben mentioned, and as Jeff mentioned, it was a no-bid contract. Many of us are concerned about the fact that there was no program in place that would anticipate the need for a cleanup company to come in. You know, after all, Hurricane Sandy, of course, has been one of the most devastating weather catastrophes that we've faced in New Jersey in many, many years, but it's not the first notice that we had of these types of storms. Many of us believe that a cleanup plan should have been in place. And although that we're not here today for the issue that I'm about to address, the timing couldn't be better. And I'm going to take the opportunity to say that within the next hour, I'm going to drop a bill that would create a New Jersey Coastal Commission. And this New Jersey Coastal Commission, which once had been proposed by Governor Tom Kean, has been tweaked and studied, and I've worked on this bill for the last 3 months. It will create a 19-member panel stocked with experts and representatives from around the coastal area, from southern Middlesex County down to Cape May. It will also create 4 advisory panels that will help the Coastal Commission. And the Coastal Commission will have complete oversight for these types of situations, complete oversight in determining how contracts are awarded, how federal and state money is spent. It will have oversight into zoning and planning. And more importantly, complete oversight into environmental regulations to make sure that companies like Ashbridge do not violate environmental regulations that people like Jeff Tittle and many others have spent their careers adopting and advocating. And lastly, this Coastal Commission bill will create a uniform code that all towns, if adopted, all towns and counties will be charged to abide by. And will create and charge every town and county to create a master plan that will conform with what the Coastal Commission will create. And I also want to say that Jeff was not aware that I was going to announce this bill today. I just got the bill yesterday. This is not a surprise or a sneak attack. Just the timing couldn't be better. Jeff asked me to come and speak today, and the bill is right here. And after it's dropped, I think that this bill will go a long way to making sure that companies like Ashbridge don't come in and be given an opportunity to bid in the way that, or no bid, the way that this contract has been handled. And one other thing, although it doesn't deal with an environmental issue, and Ruben's committee will deal with primarily environmental concerns tomorrow, but a lot of us are concerned on both sides of the aisle that New Jersey residents and workers are not being granted an opportunity to participate in the cleanup. That's a separate concern, but it's one more factor that needs to be highlighted today at this press conference. Thank you very much.
I want to bring up Rika Ciara, who has been probably the most ardent environmental advocate in the legislature for quite a long time and former chair of the Environment Committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll take that title. And I also join my colleagues, Ruben and Peter, who come from this of raising families and enjoying them down the shore. And I think we're all in agreement that we want to make sure that we return the shore to its pristine environment and that it continue to be an economic engine for New Jersey for many years to come. I agree with the governor that Hurricane Sandy is our Katrina, and I think that we need to really look at the lessons of Katrina, and especially the way debris was removed and then resulted in a Superfund site. What I'm doing today is calling on the Commissioner Martin of the DEP to create an environmental monitor. I think we all agree that there should be transparency in costs, and yes, we should look into contracts and make sure they're above board. But if you could picture the debris being removed, the household paints, the pesticides that are down there, the other hazardous materials, all being removed with the bulldozer, we want to make sure that that go into our aquifers, that it doesn't exacerbate the Barnegat Bay pollution site that's already there. And we want to make sure that we return the shore to its pristine position, but also improve the environment and take this opportunity to even clean up Barnegat Bay. But I think we need to do an environmental monitor specifically to oversee all the jobs, make sure they're not making the situation worse, and that we really clean up the shore for the families that enjoy the shore for many years to come. Thanks.
And I just want to, leave before we open up to questions. So far, about 6.5 million tons of debris have been collected. As I said before, there were 260 sites. We're down to 132. Many of them are massive piles. And was there adequate prep happening ahead of time? Was there adequate monitoring when it was going in? Were things being properly sorted? And has there been any testing? I think those are kind of important. And I just wanted to, mention just one thing, because I think New Jersey itself has been a leader in solid waste. 25 years ago, this legislature put in place some of the strictest regulations and laws anywhere in the country to keep the mob out of New Jersey's waste business. We also put in very stringent reporting requirements and very stringent handling requirements. And for the first time since then, we've seen, someone with connections to organized crime actually back in the waste hauling business, and we've seen contracts and subcontracts being given out without knowing who was actually getting them. We've always had those strong laws because of what's happened in the state in the past. And to waive those laws, I think not only does it disservice to all the legislators who've helped and governors who've passed those laws, but to the people of New Jersey. And that's really why we're here. The concern, New York State has a very open and transparent process. They have an open task force on rebuilding. They actually are, 16 states are doing work on adaptation to climate change. New Jersey isn't. New York is. And so when you look at the overall issue, because we've had stringent rules and regulations, we also have some of the best companies anywhere in the country in handling waste and cleanup, from Bayshore Recycling to Terra Solutions here in Trenton to Waste Management. We have some of the better companies, and I don't understand why we go out of state and go out to a no-bid contract, especially when you look at their record and where they've been. And, New Jersey was the state where Superfund first came to be, and we have enough sites. We do not need to create any more sites. Thank you, and I'll open it up for questions.
You mentioned the reports and some concerns. Do you have any evidence, though, that these things are replicating themselves?
I think that's why we want the Oversight Committee to look into it. I do know from firsthand seeing sites and from things that have been given to me by fairly, I don't want to say reputable because they are reputable, but people in and around government, that there have been some massive piles, like in Long Beach Township, the size of 2 football fields, 80 feet high, in Manasquan, and next to the bridge across the Barnegat Bay, also some fairly big, massive piles. From what I've been able to gather from people I've talked to, many of these sites were just piled on ground. There was not, liners put down or leachate collection systems. In some cases, though, the towns themselves ended up putting berms in or hay bales to try to soak up some of this. And, the fact that EPA wasn't in here to do collection and oversight. And on another level, because I do know, and a lot of different people within the DEP, I can't find anybody who's actually been in charge of doing all that stuff. So that's anecdotal, but the question is, why isn't it transparent like in New York? Why isn't the EPA here? Why isn't there an open process? Try to get the information from DEP on what's actually happening in a lot of these places. You'll hear, things from, well, if there was a problem, people would be complaining. Well, that's not an answer. Where are the inspection reports? Where are the site preparation reports? Where are the tests?
I know that Ashford, when asked about this, they said that there were DEP monitors or DEP personnel at all these sites making sure that whatever rules and regulations.
And where are the reports? And what were they monitoring and what was being taken out and, how much things were being sorted. I really, hope that's true. But we also need to make sure that there is accountability there because we also know that a lot of the procedures and processes were waived.
You mentioned the number, 136 or?
132 is about what I
Are
hear.
they makeshift sites, all?
Yeah, they're all-
They're not, they
Some-
were pre-existing sites?
Some of them were closed sites that were reopened, some old landfills, other sites have been, ball fields and other things. So none of them were really set up for this. And that's always a problem, and that's why you should have, I think, you should have had a plan in place so that you have those sites ready. And some of the sites that they originally planned to go to, luckily they didn't go to. Some were unlined areas in the Pinelands, some former landfills, but we heard that they didn't, actually not used a couple of them. But some other landfills have been reopened, and we don't know, if they're in line sections or not. And there's other places where you're storing things temporarily where, because they're temporary and things are moving so fast that you may not have done diligence.
DEP is saying they're doing a lot of visual inspections. Why is that not sufficient?
I'll just say it this way, that when you're dealing with all types of toxic chemicals, paints, automotive parts, metals, oil, hydrocarbons, pesticides, fertilizers that are being piled, they could be under a giant pile. They could be commingled in there, so you need to actually have tests. You have to be seeing what's going in and what's coming out and what's in the pile. I can drive by this building and think it's a perfectly normal place. As we all know, it's not always very normal on, legislative days. So I think that's part of the problem with visual inspections.
Can I ask some remarks? With this commission that you talked about, what makes you think the governor would go for something? I mean, it seems like that would take away some of the power, influence he would have, and I can't see him saying, okay, that sounds like a good idea.
Well, the governor has said repeatedly in many, many press conferences in Belmar and Seabright and all throughout the last several months that, and I agree, that the New Jersey Shore is a unique ecosystem. It's unlike any ecosystem, I think, anywhere in the country. It's our primary area of recreation. Hundreds of thousands of New Jerseyans have used the shore for family recreation, myself included, my family for many years. If the governor, and I use the conditional word if, and as elected officials, we learn to use the word if a lot because it needs to be conditionally phrased. If the governor truly believes that the New Jersey Shore is a unique ecosystem, and if he believes that it needs to be brought back the way it was, it's going to take, by the way, it's going to take between 5 and 10 years. And if it's going to be rebuilt to withstand another potentially devastating storm, and if it's to be rebuilt, when I say it, the boardwalks, the dunes, the roadways, the sanitary sewer lines, the storm sewers, the bridges, everything you can imagine from Cheesequake Park down to Cape May, then I would hope he would agree with former Governor Thomas Kean that it's a long time coming that we establish this coastal commission that would really in many ways serve as a regional planning board. The last 25 years or so, papers like the Star-Ledger and the Gannett papers have constantly written editorials about the need for regional planning boards. That the way that New Jersey does business, the home rule concept, has been attacked on many fronts. But one of the primary areas is the manner in which towns implement zoning laws, implement laws dealing with site plan approval, with planning boards, the haphazard way in which they administer various environmental laws. I won't mention specific towns because that's not the purpose of the commission. But if we look back at what's happened the last 5 years alone, there are 2 towns in particular that have put boardwalks back in the exact same footprint, and each time they get blown away. And what do? They go back and put the boardwalk back the same way, in the same footprint. Belmar accepted. I know Belmar has done something a little different. They've moved the boardwalk, and they're putting it back in a different fashion. And I want to commend Mayor Matt Doherty, because he's actually, I think, done things a little bit better than some of the others. But if we put all that together, and if the governor truly believes that we need to preserve and protect the health, safety, and welfare of the shore towns and our residents, I believe him to be an open-minded person. And the concept of home rule will go by the wayside. And the concept of zoning and planning and environmental protection will rise to the fore. Although it doesn't answer your question, I'd like to add something else, because the question you asked Jeff before about the cleanup. It's obvious, but I think we need to state the obvious. Nothing can get done the right way if we don't have the foundation of a proper cleanup. If we have, roller coasters in the roller coaster debris in the water, and we have toxins, and we have debris and pesticides and chemicals, and those are not being cleaned up, what good is it if a boardwalk goes up before Memorial Day? What good is it if a pier, an amusement pier is established before Memorial Day? What good is it if the shore comes back but it's not rebuilt the right way? That's why I think a monitor is so important. And we're not asking much. We agree that we need to clean up. We agree with the governor's drive and intent. I don't question his integrity or sincerity, but I do question the manner in which he's proceeding. And I do question the manner in which many of the towns are proceeding. Unless we have a real solid cleanup, nothing else really matters. That's the foundation. It'd be like building a new addition in your home. The first thing the contractors do is they put the footings in. That's the foundation. If those footings don't go in the right way, the carpentry and electrical and plumbing don't matter. That's how we see the people who are here today. That's how we look at the cleanup. It's got to be done the right way before anything else happens.
I just wanted to mention on Coastal Commission, Sierra Club worked with Governor Kane on a Coastal Commission back then, and believe the time is even more appropriate now as we look to rebuild. Many states have similar bodies. California does, Oregon does, even North Carolina. And states that actually do this work and do it better, they actually help their towns, because a lot of towns now don't even have planners to help them figure out how to rebuild. But more importantly, places that do better in protecting the environment have lesser impacts from storms. And I think Sandy showed that up and down the coast, where we did protect natural resources and did better planning, did not see the devastation in places that didn't. And that's true across the country. And that's why I think having regional planning is so important, because it actually, instead of each town looking at a narrow band, you look at all of Long Beach Island and what's best for the entire island in planning and growth versus each, the 8 different towns. So that's why we tend to support it. And I just want to follow up on one thing on cleanup. FEMA rules are very specific too. FEMA will not reimburse for any cleanup activities that are not consistent and follow state and federal law. So if we are waiving things and we are doing things that turn out to be in violation, we will not get the funding. And that's another important reason why you should be doing it right. Well, thanks everybody.